Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Zevachim, and this is our 10th class. So kol hakavod everyone. Today we are going to be reviewing Daf 66 to 73. And we're going to finish a chapter and then begin a new chapter as well tonight. Okay, Daf 66 tells us that the Mishnah we're also beginning a chapter now, so we're going to do. So I think we're doing the whole 7th chapter. Is that true? That is true. We're going to do the whole 7th chapter. The Mishnah tells us that. Okay, I'll speak it out outside and then we'll read it inside. Basically, we learned that there are 2 types of bird offerings. If you remember, there's a burnt offering, an olat ha'of, which means the burnt offering that is a bird, and there's a chatat ha'of, a sin offering that is a bird. And we spoke about the fact that each one is done a little bit differently, right? So the burnt offering, the olah, is done at the top of the mizbeach. The sin offering, the chatat ha'of, is done at the bottom of the mizbeach. And we talked about the different procedures. Did they remove the head? Did they, not remove the head? Did they eat the bird? Did they burn the bird? But the Mishnah now is going to discuss what if you did the wrong action. So I'm actually going to share with you. Hold on 1 second. I'm actually going to share with you a summary of what I'm about to say, so you can just see it here, and then I will speak it out. So our Mishnah, so again, the Mishnah starts, there are 2 sections to this Mishnah, plus the next Mishnah, which the Gemara is going to bring up in a minute. The Mishnah says, let's say you had a chatat ha'of, again, here it says chatas ha'of, again, a sin offering that is a bird. If you do it in the right place, in the right way, and for its sake, then obviously you did everything right and it is valid. If you did it for the sake of something else, meaning for the burnt offering, or you did it with the action of the burnt offering, of the olah, or again, right? So here the first part is going to talk about you did it at the bottom, meaning below means at the bottom of the mizbeach. And did you have, again, it's basically 3 different variables. Where on the mizbeach, where on the altar it is, the actual procedure, right? So did you remove the head? Did you open the body? Right? The procedure itself, and what the Kohen had in mind, right? For the right korban or the wrong korban. So either way, if you can see here, right, all of those different variables, if you don't have even one of those variables, the korban is invalid. And if you took the chatat ha'of, the sin offering, and you did it above, meaning where you normally do the olah, the burnt offering, so then it is also invalid. Let's go to the second part of the Mishnah. Tells us, let's say you have an olat ha'of, again, the burnt offering, and that's done above, right? So that's why most of the things are above. Now, how did you do it? Now, just to remind ourselves, why is this important? Because the chatat needs kavanah, meaning the sin offering, you need to have in mind that this is a sin offering. That's why you have to do it for the sake of a sin offering, for a chatat. An olah does not have to be done for its sake, and therefore it is less stringent. So let's speak it out, right? The olah, the burnt offering, if you did it for, like, again, for the wrong korban, right? Had in mind a sin offering, it is still valid because that's okay. It just doesn't count for the owner because that's the wrong korban, but it's still a valid sacrifice. If you did it like a sin offering, but intended it as an olah, that's not enough because the procedure was wrong. And if you did it at the bottom of the mizbeach, it is also invalid. Okay, that is the Mishnah. So now the Gemara explains what we're talking about. So I don't know if you remember, but last week we discussed that the way to slaughter the bird for the offering is what's called milika. You remember, right? Milika is when you basically cut the neck of the animal with the Kohen's finger. So for milika of the chatat, of the sin offering, you only have to cut one, we call it one siman, meaning in the neck of the bird there are two we'll call it two pipes, right? What we would call the esophagus and the trachea. It might be called something else in a bird, I don't remember. But basically the windpipe and the esophagus, you only have to cut one of them for the sin offering, for the chatat. But for the olah, you have to actually remove the head, meaning you have to cut both of those simanim, both of the, whatever the word is, things. Okay, you got it. Right. So maybe that's the procedure that we're talking about. And like if you did 1 versus 2, maybe that's what the Mishnah is talking about when it talks about doing the procedure for the wrong korban. Or the Gemara says, no, maybe it's about actually separating the head and separating the body. That is also a difference in the procedure of the korban. Or maybe we're talking about the way you put the blood on the mizbeach, on the altar, because for the chatat, it needs to be sprinkled on, and for the olah, it's just like squeezed on, and those are two different things. So basically the Gemara says there's 3 different ways to do the procedure in the wrong way. And the question is, what are we talking about? Which procedure is wrong? So another thing the Gemara says is that we're not saying that he did malika in the wrong place, right? Maybe we said, like, maybe he killed the bird like up on top and then ran down. The Gemara says that's not the issue. The issue is that we're talking about the sprinkling of the blood, and that the blood needs to be put on the mizbeach differently for the two different sacrifices. Now the Gemara says, even though the sacrifice is invalid, it is not a nevela. So let's explain what that means. Okay, a sacrifice being valid means it can be put on the altar, on the mizbeach. If the sacrifice is invalid, it may not be put on the altar, on the mizbeach, right? It's invalidated. However, now you have a dead bird. Now, Jewish law sees dead animals in different ways, and we're going to talk about that now in a minute. There are different, different examples of we'll say dead animals, and depending on certain things, they can give off specific types of impurity. Okay, so something that's stringent is what's called a nevela. Nevela is an animal that dies that was not slaughtered, right? So if it was hit by a car, if it dropped dead, if it was shot, that is called a nevela. Nevela gives a certain amount of impurity, right? It's called tum'at nevela, the impurity of this dead animal. Now, there's an animal that died versus a bird. A bird that died has a different level of impurity. So a bird that is a nevela is not going to impart impurity if you just touch it. However, if you eat it, so when you swallow it, it will make the person impure. Okay, this in Hebrew is called mitameh bebeit habliya, right? It makes the person impure when they swallow it, like literally swallow it. So the Gemara now just said, if you do milika, right? You slaughtered the animal, the bird, and it is not a valid sacrifice. However, and we're gonna speak this out in a minute. However, because you ritually slaughtered the animal, it is not a nevela, and it does not transmit impurity. Okay, great. We're going to learn in a minute that if you have an animal that is about to die, right, for natural causes or again other reasons, it's about to die. If you slaughter it, right, if you shecht it, it is then taken out of the category of nevela, and now that it is dead, it will not transmit impurity. So that's what we're talking about, and we're going to go back and forth, right? Again, we talked about milika is parallel in the temple to shchita, to slaughtering of an animal. So that's what we're discussing. Okay, now, okay, hold on one second. Okay, now, so that is the first Mishnah. Now, the next Mishnah says that in all the cases that we just mentioned, remember you did it the wrong way, if you ate the bird, you are not impure, which is what we said, because there was milika, even though it is not a valid sacrifice, it does not make the person impure. Okay, so from now on, we're going to say it's not a nevela. Okay, now, it is still, again, it's an invalid sacrifice, but it still has sanctity. Therefore, if you use it for your own personal benefit, you have transgressed, right? What's called me'ilah. If you remember, me'ilah is when you steal, right, or use something that was sanctified for your own benefit. So these birds are still in that category for me'ilah, because again, as we said, you can't eat it. You can't eat it because it wasn't done properly. But it still has a level of sanctity. Okay. And the chatat ha'of, right? That's the case for the sin offering, and the burnt offering, the olat ha'of. If it's done like the chatat, there is mi'ilah, meaning it's still, even though it's an invalid sacrifice, it still has sanctity, and you're not allowed to use it for your own benefit. Or no, there is no me'ilah because now it became a sin offering. Remember, you did the procedure like a sin offering. Therefore, you turned this olah, this burnt offering, into a chatat, into a sin offering. And after a chatat is all the service is finished, the kohen is allowed to eat the chatat. Therefore, there is no mi'ilah, right? You're allowed to get benefit. You if you were a Kohen, if you were a male Kohen, then you could get benefit from this bird. And therefore, this korban actually does not have mi'ilah. Let's say you did the chatat, the sin offering, with the proper intention, right? Lishma, for it. Again, there's no mi'ilah, but if you do it with the wrong intention, so because it cannot be eaten by the Kohen, there is mi'ilah, right? Again, if something can be eaten, it becomes permitted to benefit from. If it cannot be eaten, it means that it retains a certain level of sanctity, and therefore you may not get any benefit from it. Okay, Dov 67 tells us that, let's say you had, remember we talked about two categories of sacrifices. Kodshe Kodshim, right, the most sanctified, and Kodshe Kalim, the less sanctified. So Kodshe Kodshim, that we know you're supposed to slaughter in the north of the courtyard. If you slaughtered it in the south of the courtyard with intent that it should be a shlamim, meaning the wrong sacrifice, so then it actually still retains the sanctity and you're not allowed to get any benefit from it. And that is because, right, parts of that sacrifice need to be burnt on the altar, and therefore you're not allowed to get benefit from it. But a chatat ha'of, right, a sin offering, a bird sin offering, because it is completely eaten, again, even if you did things that were wrong, there still is no issue of mi'ilah. And if you did get benefit from it, you did not transgress in that way. Okay, and as we said, therefore, if you have an olah, the burnt offering, and you did it like a chatat, like the sin offering, so then there is no mi'ilah. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to explain, right? Let's say you had an asham, right? Asham is a guilt offering. It's like the sin offering. It needs to be done in the north. So let's say you did it in the north, but you thought that it was a different sacrifice. It was a shlamim, right, peace offering. So there still is mi'ilah, and therefore, maybe we should say, as the opposite than what we just said before, maybe we should say that if you have the olah ta'of and you do it like the chatat, again, you have the burnt offering and you do it like the sin offering, so maybe it should retain the sanctity and you may not benefit from it at all. So the Gemara says no, because the original case that you just brought with the asham, you didn't change the place, you did it in the right place, therefore it's still valid. But with the birds, we actually were talking about the fact that you changed the place, right? You either did it on top or you did it below, right? You did it in the wrong place, and therefore you have changed the nature of that sacrifice. Or the Gemara says no. Maybe the case is with the asham, the guilt offering, maybe you did do it in the south with the wrong intention, and then there, again, you still cannot get benefit. There is mi'ilah. And the Gemara says, why is that? Because you didn't change the service. It's the same service, meaning if you remember, all the animal sacrifices have the same service in terms of you slaughter it, you collect the blood, you put it on the altar, meaning it's very similar. Obviously, there are differences, but it is overall similar. But again, if we go back to the birds, right, you change the name, right? Again, back to our Mishnah. You change the name, meaning you had the wrong intention. You change the place, top versus bottom, and you change the service. Therefore, it's totally different. And that is one opinion. Or you changed it, maybe you just changed it, and maybe you have to also change it for a different owner. Therefore, it becomes, remember we said you had a burnt offering, olah, and you did it like a chatat. We said it actually becomes a chatat. And therefore, there is no me'ilah. Again, if you got benefit from it, you didn't transgress in that sense. Now, we said that the olah becomes a chatat. However, says the Gemara, if you took a chatat, right, again, the sin offering, and you did it like an olah up on top, it does not become an olah. One opinion. Another opinion is that it does become like the olah, right? That is going to be, that is the discussion. And again, it goes back to how, remember we said, when you do milika, for the chatat, for the sin offering, you only have to do one siman, right? One of the types. But for the olah, you have to do two. So what does the Gemara say? That when you take the chatat that you only needed one for, and you do it up on top where the olah is, when you cut the first siman, right? As soon as you cut the first siman, you now just made it a chatat, but it's in the wrong place. So it's already a chatat, and therefore it can't become an olah. Again, olah is two simanim all the way through, and therefore chatat done on top does not become an olah, but an olah down at the bottom becomes a chatat. Okay, if that was not confusing enough, now we have more confusion. Okay, the issue with birds is, and there's actually a whole masechet called kinim, but nothing against that masechet, but Baruch Hashem, it's very short because it is extremely complicated. Because generally, when you went to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple, you brought what's called a ken. A ken, it literally means a nest, but basically you brought, maybe it was you were holding something, or it was a basket, but it was something that had two birds. Many times when you have to bring a bird offering, many times you have to bring two different offerings, meaning one an olah and one a chatat, and you have these two birds. Now, Masechet Kinim is all about the birds getting mixed up, because as we know, live birds tend to fly around. Now, what happens if you have, right, two women? Now, the reason we're using women is because after a woman gives birth, she has to bring this sacrifice, meaning a ken of two birds. One is a chatat and one is an olah. Okay, so if that's not complicated enough, so now we have two women. Each one of them has two birds. So I guess that's four birds, two women. Okay, remember that. So here's the case. Two women bring a pair of birds. Now, let's say that the Kohen already sacrificed one bird for each one of these women. And now they're bringing another pair, one for one and one for the other. Don't ask me why they're not separate, but they're together. So one woman needs to bring an olah and one needs to bring a chatat. Now, let's say, now again, right? So it's two birds, but they're two separate sacrifices for two separate people. Now, obviously, if the Kohen did it correctly, so he did it correctly. Let's say he did it incorrectly. So if the Kohen he sacrificed both of them up on top, like an olah, or both of them down below, so then one of them is going to be valid and one of them is going to be invalid. Because remember, one of them needed to be either above or below, but the other one didn't. So one sacrifice is valid, one sacrifice is invalid. If he did one above and one below, now, you'd say, great, that's what he was supposed to do. But if he didn't have in mind the right person, maybe he did the wrong person's one in the wrong place, and therefore they're both invalid because, again, maybe they were done in the opposite places. Now, the Gemara says, now remember what we said, if you did the Ola in the bottom, it becomes a chatat. So why don't we say, oh, if you did both of them at the bottom, that should be fine, right? Now, it says, right, you can't say that the Ola becomes a chatat because here, why doesn't it work? Because here you have two different owners. And therefore, that doesn't work. If you have one owner, then it works, right? Let's say one person needed to bring two sacrifices, and the Kohen did the wrong sacrifice in the wrong place. If he did the Olah at the bottom, that turns it into a chatat, and that would be okay. But for two people, it's not okay. Okay, let's get more complicated. Two women, each one needs to bring two sacrifices. So each one needs to bring a chatat and an oaf, and a chatat and an oaf. Okay? Now, that's not enough. Plus one more sacrifice, meaning each one needs either an olah or a chatat. So each one needs three. Okay. Now, so therefore, right? If each one needs three, they bring three pairs, right? 2, 4, 6. They bring three pairs of birds. Okay. Buckle up. Okay. One pair was designated. Okay. It was designated as, right? This is a chatat for Rachel, and this is an olah for Leah. Okay. Then one pair was not designated, and one pair had one designated as, the third pair, sorry, first pair is designated the korban and the person. The second pair is not designated at all, and the third pair is designated as specific sacrifices, but not for whom. Okay, one is a chatat, one is an olah, but it's not for who. It doesn't say who is for who. So now, if the Kohen put all of them on top or all of them in the bottom, half are okay, half are invalid. If the Kohen put half on top, half on the bottom, all of them are invalid. Again, because it could have been the wrong ones, except for the undesignated ones. Remember, pair number 2, undesignated. And even pair number 3 is also invalid because, again, maybe they were done in the wrong place. Okay, let's make it more complicated. Each woman has to, is going to bring a pair, but she also said that she was going to donate an extra pair, right? So let's say she says, if I have a boy, I'm going to bring, right, a bird offering to the temple. That's called a neder, right? It's voluntary, but she has to do it now that she said she was going to do it. And let's say she had a boy. So now she has to bring 2 pairs, right? One pair, which the Gemara calls chova. It's what she has to bring because she just had the baby, plus the neder, which means what she volunteered to bring. Again, she has to bring both of them now, but one of them is because she volunteered. Now, the Kohen needed to do 3 birds above, because, again, the chova is one olah, one chatat, right? One up, one down. So, right, one up, one down. The neder, you can't bring up chatat as a neder. So the neder is an olah, right? So now he needs to bring 3 on top, 1 at the bottom. Okay, so so he needed to do 3 on top, 1 at the bottom. Let's say the Kohen did 2 on top and 2 on the bottom. So now she has to bring another bird as, remember, so now it was supposed to be 3 and 1. Now it's 2 and 2. I feel like I'm playing a game with my grandson, right? 2 and 2. So she has to bring 1 more to go on top, right? Because then there'll be 3. Okay, there are 2 down here, but at least there's 1, so that's fine. Okay. Now, if there were 2, we didn't mention this, but bird offerings can come in 2 types, a dove and a pigeon, right? A tur and a bnei yonah, right? They're different ages, but also they're different, but they anyway. So if the birds were 2 different types of birds, right? So again, right, it was 2 and 2. But now they're different types. So we said she only has to bring 1, but maybe she said she was going to bring 2 doves, but maybe she said she was going to bring 2 pigeons. So therefore she now has to bring 4, right? 2 extra, 1 dove and 1 pigeon, just in case that's what she said she was going to do. Let's say she designated 1 set, but forgot which one. So now she has to bring 4 new birds. If she linked each one of the voluntary ones to the ones that she needed to bring, now she needs to bring 5 up on top. If they were all the same type of birds, and if it was 2 types of birds, she has to bring 6 on top. Just trust me, but if you want, I have slides. You can email me. I'll send you slides of all of these scenarios. Last scenario, if the Kohen didn't remember what he did, right? He's like, oh, I had a bad day. I didn't remember what I did. So now she has to bring 4 for her neder and 2, right? 4 up here, and then 1 on top, and then 1 on the bottom for her chov, right, for what she needed. Or, right, maybe she has to bring 2 chataot, again, 2 at the bottom. Okay, that was for Masachet Kinim. If you're interested, I'm happy to go into more detail another time. Let's move on. Just as a side point, here on daf 68, from now for 10 dafim, for 10 pages, Rashi isn't really Rashi. If you look at the Gemara, Rashi's actually like on the side, and it is a different perush, and therefore the pages are going to be much shorter for the next 10 daf. Okay, if you remember, I mentioned that if an animal is going to die and you slaughter it, meaning in a ritual way, shchita, it takes it out of the world of nevela, and does not transmit impurity. Okay, so now the Mishnah tells us a person who isn't allowed to do milika, right? Only a Kohen is allowed to do milika. If a regular person does milika, the milika is invalid. But the bird is not a nevela. Remember again, that distinction, even though it's not a valid sacrifice, it is not a nevela and it does not give tum'ah. If a Kohen did the milika wrong, meaning he used his left hand, he did it at night, he did it, again, he did it from the front with a knife. Not with a knife, sorry. He did, let's say, a not sanctified animal, what's called chulin. He did that in the temple, or he took something sanctified, kodshim, and he did it outside. So all of those things, even though they're wrong, the animal is not an nevela and does not give impurity. However, if the Kohen did milika with a knife, or he did milika on an unsanctified bird, right? Again, chulin inside, or he did milika outside, or he did it on a bird that was either too young or too old, then that animal is a nevela, even though he did milika, because the milika itself was wrong. That animal is still a nevela. Sorry, 1 second. But the Mishnah says this is the rule. If the disqualification, is that a word? I don't know if that. If the thing that disqualifies it is about sanctity, is about kodesh, meaning the bird itself is fine. It's just that you did something that was wrong with the procedure, so then it's not a nevela. But if the invalidation is because of the bird itself, then it still is a nevela, even if you did milika. Okay, so now the Gemara explains. If you did it with the left hand or you did it at night, it's not a nevela. If you did it with a knife or the wrong person, it is a nevela. So the Gemara asks why. What's the distinction between those two things? So the Gemara says that there is a temple service that is valid if it's done with the left hand or at night, and therefore, if you do that, it is enough sanctity to not make it a nevela, right? Again, for it to not be impure. However, right, if it's the wrong person or totally the wrong service, it's going to make it a nevela, meaning it's as if you didn't do anything. Okay, right. So the Gemara talks about different types of shchita, and is shchita really seen as a temple service? And we know that during the time of the bamot were altars. Before the temple was built, you were allowed to bring a sacrifice on altars that were not in Jerusalem, again, within certain limitations. But in those days, a non-Kohen could do malika, and it would not be a nevela. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, you can't learn from that, because that is an extenuating circumstances. That's not during the time of the temple, and therefore we cannot learn from that. Okay, daf 69. If you, if you do shchita of a bird that is sanctified, it will not become a nevela, meaning no impurity. But if you do malika of a regular bird that was not sanctified outside, that will be a nevela. It will give tum'ah. It will give impurity. Malika of a person who is not a kohen, and kmitza of a kmitza is what's done to the grain offering. If a non-kohen does that, if you put it on the altar, the question is, do you have to take it off, or you can leave it on? So we say malika was allowed to stay on, but not the kmitza. Okay, as we said, right, milika that is invalid works enough to make it not be a nevela. Okay, new word for today. So we have nevela. Now we have the concept of treifa. Treifa is an animal that has a certain type of defect. We'll learn about it another time, but it has a certain type of defect that will make it die within 12 months. Okay, that's a treifa. So as we mentioned, if you shecht, if you slaughter a treifa, it saves it from becoming a nevela, as I said before, right? Meaning, if you ritually slaughter this animal, even though you can't eat it, right? But that action makes it so that the animal does not become a nevela, and therefore there is no impurity. The same thing with milika, as we said before, that milika is parallel to shchita. If you do milika, it saves it from becoming a nevela. That's what we just said. Okay. Let's say again, and then the Gemara goes and talks about what if you do shchita to a bird? Now, again, outside of the temple, that's the way you kill a bird so that you can eat it. Inside the temple, you have to do malika. And then the Gemara discusses, what if I do malika outside? What if I do shchita inside? Right? Those are not, again, in general, they're parallel, but for a bird, they aren't. And therefore, sometimes it is seen as proper. Again, if you're doing it in the right place, and other times it is not. Okay, the bottom of Daf 69, we have the next Mishnah. Let's say you did milika on the bird and you found out that it's a treifa. Again, there was a defect inside the bird that you didn't know. And now, as we said, it cannot be sacrificed, but it is not a nevela. Or another opinion is it is a nevela because it's not a sacrifice anymore. As we said, right, shchita of an animal purifies the treifa from becoming a nevela. Sorry for all the Hebrew words. I just don't know how to translate them, but I think you understand. Right, and that is a more stringent type of impurity. Again, a nevela of an animal, even if you touch it, you become impure. Remember, we said a nevela of a bird only you only become impure if you eat it, if you swallow it. And again, the Gemara says, therefore, using kal vachomer. Remember again this idea of comparison, something more stringent to something less. Therefore, the Gemara says that malika should purify the bird and not make it transmit impurity. Or no, maybe the nevela of an animal is purified, but malika does not do that. And that is the question. So now the Gemara has a new concept. I think we've seen it before. It's called dayo. Dayo means like die, like enough. What does that mean? Enough means that if we're going to learn one thing from another, do we say you learn one from the other and then you keep the laws the same, or maybe I can change, right, and maybe make it exponential or make it more. And the Gemara says that, right, when we learn one from the other, we have to keep it limited. Dayo, we limit it, and we cannot expand it too far, right? And therefore, animals and birds, right? Shchita makes it able to be eaten. Therefore, it gets rid of the impurity. So too for the bird. Shchita and malika make it able to be eaten or sacrificed. Therefore, it should be it should be taken out of the idea of impurity. Now there's a verse that talks about the chelev. Chelev is fat. So the chelev, the fat of a nevela, and the fat of a trefa. So these things, so the Gemara says that these things can be used, meaning they are not impure, but they cannot be eaten. And now the Gemara talks about, what are we talking about? So first of all, for a non-kosher animal, it cannot be a trefa, but its fats are impure. A non-kosher bird, you can't eat it, but it is not impure. So again, there are a lot of details here in terms of what is impure and what isn't, what cannot be eaten and what can be eaten. Okay, Daf 70 says, again, talks more about these fats and how they are prohibited. You may not eat from them, and some of them do give impurity. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. Again, if the bird is sanctified, it's kodesh, and you did malika, if it didn't have any other blemishes, it is not a nevela, as we said before. However, if it had a blemish before and you knew about it, now it is a nevela. It does give impurity, or maybe not. Okay, and therefore, and okay, and that's the end. I'm going to end the 7th chapter. We still have 3 more daf, which we're going to try to do very quickly. In the beginning of the 8th chapter. Okay, this is going to be talking about mixtures, right? What's called ta'arovet. We had this in previous masechtot when we're talking about food being mixed or things that are prohibited being mixed with permitted things. Now we're going to talk about sacrifices getting mixed up. So the Mishnah says, if sacrifices get mixed up with sacrifices that need to die, right? What is this? A sin offering. There are 5 sin offerings that I mean, we'll learn about it another time. I think we've even learned it, but there are 5 sin offerings that are invalid, and therefore, let's say one of them is that the owner died, so you can't bring the sacrifice. Therefore, that animal needs to die. Cannot be an offering, and you can't eat. You can't redeem it, so it needs to die. So let's say a regular korban, a regular sacrifice of an animal, gets mixed up with one of these animals that need to die. Even if it's 1 in 10,000 animals, all of them need to die. Okay, don't worry. I mean, you could worry if you want, but then it continues, Daf 71. Let's say it got mixed up with an animal that was involved in sin, right? Or needs to die, right? Let's say this ox killed a person, or the owner said it needed to, it killed someone, or it was sodomized, or again, if for whatever reason it cannot be a sacrifice. So then, now we have this mixture of a valid sacrifice with animals that are invalid sacrifices. So for all of them, you wait till they get a blemish, and then you sell them, and then you take the money and you buy a new sacrifice. If the sacrifice gets mixed up with regular animals, you sell all of them, and then you again buy one for that sacrifice, and you sell all of those animals as sacrifices, and the Kohen brings them as an olah, right? But not for the owner. Let's say an olah, a burnt offering, got mixed up with another olah. So the Kohen brings it as an olah, but again, we don't know whose it is. Let's say the olah got mixed up with a shlamim, with the wrong sacrifice. You wait till it gets a blemish, you sell it, and with the money of the most expensive one, you buy an olah and a shlamim, right? Whatever the other sacrifice was, and then you bring that. Let's say it got mixed up with a bechor, a firstborn, or maser, a tithe. So you wait till it gets a blemish, and then everything can be eaten like a bechor or maser. You redeem one of them and you make that into the sacrifices, right? And then the Mishnah tells us all sacrifices can get mixed up except for a chatat and an asham because they're different animals. So you would never mix them up. Okay, so now the Gemara says, even if it's one chatat that needs to die with 10,000 sacrifices, even that they all need to die. And basically what the Mishnah is teaching us is that there is no bitul. Bitul means, right, bitul means nullification. There is no nullification with animals that can't be brought as a sacrifice or that are forbidden to get any benefit from, right? It doesn't matter how many, they do not get nullified. Daf 72 tells us that sometimes, right, we know that sometimes there is this idea of majority. Why don't we say majority are fine, so maybe they should all be fine? So the Gemara says that it depends, right, when we say that. For things that are usually sold individually, so then they're called, right, chashuv. They're very important, and therefore each one of them is important. Therefore, they can't be nullified, right? If I say, right, I lost my diamond in, I don't know, a bunch of rocks, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, there's 10 rocks and 1 diamond. Oh, so forget it. There's no diamond here. What are you talking about? The diamond is precious, and I'm always going to look for that 1 diamond, right? The same thing with korbanot, right? We don't say, oh, the majority are fine. No, each one is important. Therefore, there is no nullification. There's no bitul. And then the Gemara discusses this concept of things that either are always sold by number, right? You buy a dozen eggs. You don't buy a pound of eggs, right? Each egg is important. So is it something that is always sold individually or sometimes sold individually? Daf 73 says that, right, animals are sometimes sold individually, and therefore there, as we said, there is no bitul. And from here, right, the Gemara talks about the concept of, wait, why don't I just take one animal out at a time and then say, oh, this must be the sacrifice, and sacrifice it? And we say no, because if something leaves a group, then we go according to majority. But if you take one out, we say it has a 50-50 chance. Is it the prohibited thing or the permissible thing? So the Gemara says, okay, great, let's make all the animals move and then just take one of them. So the Gemara is like, no, we're afraid that maybe, right, let's say there are 10 animals and 10 Kohanim are going to come at the same time. Now it's not majority. Now it's you have a 50-50 chance of getting, even though you don't really have a 50-50 chance, but if everyone comes at the same time, we assume that the one you take could be prohibited or could be permissible. Let's say a bird sin offering gets mixed up with the burnt offering. All of them need to die, but that's only if the Kohen asked which one was which. If he didn't and he brought them, as we said, all above as an olah, half are okay, half are invalid, right? Again, same thing with below. And again, this seems to show that even though there's a mixture, half of them are okay. So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about animals, right? There's a machloket if animals, if at this moment they cannot be brought as sacrifices, that's called dichui, right? They were pushed away from being a sacrifice. But now if I put them all on top and I sacrifice them, half of them are in the right place. So one opinion is once something has been pushed away, it cannot be brought back, and therefore all of them would be invalid. Or no, they were invalid, but now they are permitted, so maybe that would be okay. Okay, with that, we are going to end today's class, and Be'ezrat Hashem, we will pick it up next Wednesday. And yeah, we can have a minute of questions if you want, but yeah, go ahead.
All right. Now it's very obvious that the rules are extremely intricate, and don't give me a full answer, just say yes or no. But when you talk about the animal sacrifices, is it comparable? Are they just as complicated, even though different rules because it's a different type of an animal?
I would say less complicated, meaning the place where we saw complicated was putting the blood on the altar, meaning different animal sacrifices, the blood application was different. Above, below, 2 sides, 4 sides, 1 side, that was complicated. But everything till that point was less complicated.
Okay.
The birds are much more complicated.
That's a generalization. That's good.
Correct.
And how would a Kohen even going to know if an animal was going to die within a year?
Yes, so the Gemara talks about, we'll learn it later on, there are certain blemishes. Some of them you can tell from the outside, but some of them you could not tell till you opened up the animal, right? And that's why we always talk about, that's why we always talk about when like slaughterhouses are slaughtering animals to eat, they need to check different parts of the animal to make sure that it was a fully healthy animal, because some things you don't know from the outside.
And they check the lungs first.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
By the way, is this why, like, whenever I buy the whole chickens, they're always cut up? Like, like in America, the whole chicken would be like intact and it had a cavity, but here, the chickens are open or cut.
You could buy a whole chicken.
I buy a whole, but it has it's cut. So it's like fillet. It doesn't have like a intact cavity. There's like a,
I've seen a hole, but right, obviously, right, they always have to, after they shech the animal, they always have to check the lungs. So, right, they take out all the insides, but you could buy a whole chicken, like whole.
Okay.
But yes, but it's the lungs that they check to make sure that there's right, that they're halak, right? That's where we get the idea of glut, right? That they're smooth. And we'll talk about that. There's a whole masechet about that.
Thank you.
It's like now the Thanksgiving, they sell turkeys, they're whole. They're not cut up.
Well, no, they're not cut up, but they're open so they can reach it. You can actually go in and pull the lung out without opening up.
Yes,
the inside is all gone, but it's still whole. The outside is still whole. It's not cut up in pieces.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving to those who are celebrating.
Yes. And have a great week. Shabbat Shalom. And Bezrat Hashem. We will see each other next week. Bezrat Hashem. Regular day, regular time next week.
Bye-bye.
There's going to be
Yeah.
a change after that, but okay.
Okay, the
One more
next one's
time, and then
Wednesday.
that's it.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye
Shabbat
everyone.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.